Hello, my name is Ocean Rosado, and today I will be talking about America's involvement with war in Syria. As I mentioned, my name is Ocean Rosado, and my dream is to become the President of the United States one day. And that is why I'm studying political science as a freshman. I'm also an entrepreneur and a U.S. Army reservist. The reason I picked this topic is because it's one of the major issues that's going around in the world that needs to be resolved. As far as we know, it looks like this war is never going to end without some political decision. Now, the Syria civil war has been a chaotic disaster. It has been divided by four major parts who are supported by foreign powers who are confused towards who they're supporting or who they're fighting against or for. Assad has even killed millions of people, including his own, with chemical weapons. This led to Donald Trump responding with 52 Tomahawk missiles, destroying cities of Syria, which has resulted in ruins. Now, to get a better understanding of this issue, we have to go back in time, starting at 2011. What has started as a protest turned in an uprising against the president of Syria, dictator Assad, after 7 years of peace, which turned into a civil war in 2011. The first shots were fired by Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad against peaceful Arab Spring demonstrators. The people of Syria couldn't take any more corruption within the government, such as a high increase in unemployment and the lack of political freedom. Later on, protesters began to retaliate the same way Assad did by utilizing weapons. Now, a civil war had been aroused, which, as many of us know, a war between citizens of the same country. The rise of people created a rebellion, and some even defected into their own free Syrian army in 2011. In 2012, a bunch of extremist forums around the world came into Syria to join the rebels in their fight against Assad. Assad then encourages this by releasing prisoners to tame the rebellion and make it harder for foreign backers to support them. Later on, a new branch called Jabhat al-Nusra emerged when Syrian Kurd groups revolted in arms and settled at the north. During this time, Iran, one of Saddam's partners, distributed supplies and men to help him in his country, which became a proxy war. Now, a proxy war is a war instigated by the major power that does not itself become involved. The oil-rich Arab states in the Persian Gulf began to send money and other supplies to the rebels through Turkey to counter Iran's negative influence. Then another malicious group called the Hezbollah, backed by Iran, began to support Assad with even more firepower and men. By 2013, the Middle East has been divided into two sections because of this action. The Gulf states responded and turned it up a notch by increasing their supplies even more to help the rebels through Jordan, who also opposes Assad. Later on, Obama becomes aware of Assad's cruelty against his people and the death tolls occurring and took affirmative action by authorizing secretive support to the rebels through the CIA, but is somehow delayed. And to make up for that, the U.S. tried to persuade the Gulf states to stop distributing their supplies to extremists, but it was neglected. In April of that year, Assad decided to bomb civilians using chemical weapons to provoke consumption throughout the world, to tolerate any mutiny among his country. Weeks later, the U.S. officially becomes part of the war when the CIA training to help the rebels initiate to oppose Assad. In 2014, something extraordinary happens. A group deterred from the rebels formed into one of the world's deadliest terrorist organizations called Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS. ISIS then becomes Iraq's enemy, but also rivals against other rebels or organizations like the Kurds. Later on, in September, Obama decides to bomb ISIS instead of Assad. Obama then initiates a program from the Pentagon to train Assad rebels only if they decide to fight ISIS instead. The program backlash has shown cause of the U.S. party towards eliminating ISIS first instead of Assad, and also depicting how there are no like-minded Syrian proxy forces on the grounds of Syria. Turkey then decides to bomb Kurdish groups in Iran, Syria, and even Turkey, but does not attack ISIS. This leads to a confusing issue between the US and Turkey as allies. Between their forces comes confusing of the enemy, prioritizing the elimination of them. Next year, in 2015, Russia then steps in the war to help Assad out by transporting groups and materials, especially military aircraft, to bomb ISIS, but instead Assad decides to bomb anti-Assad rebels. Next year, in 2016, when Donald Trump becomes president, he agrees in terms with Assad's power in his country, pledging that he won't interfere. But at the end of that year, Assad retakes the Syrian city of Aleppo with strong military enforcement with his supporting allies. Then in April of 2017, Assad takes it upon himself to attack his people once again with chemical weapons, killing about 85 people. President Donald Trump then took affirmative action by launching 52 Tomahawk missiles attacking Syria. Then rebels of Syria were supported by other foreign actors such as the USA, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, while Russia and Iran supported the government in Syria, which became a proxy war, as I mentioned before. Today, with the accumulation of casualties added up, more than 500,000 people, including civilians and rebels with chemical warfare, the effects of this violent approach were massive, leaving people with permanent disabilities and lost limbs. Therefore, Syria is in ruin, with these foreign supporters assisting each of these groups. Now, there has been attempts to achieve peace and harmony throughout this country with a diplomatic approach, but it has failed. Chivana peace talked with Syria by negotiating between the Syria government and the Syrian opposition in the UN-backed conference has been neglected. Even the UN Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura was unsuccessful towards agreeing on a political resolution. It seems so as if this war will never end without a political solution. And this results in my presentation of America's involvement in war in Syria. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.